It's that time of the year once again where we take the best of the best and slam them against each other. But first, we got to figure out who is going where, and for that, we need that beautiful thing called tiebreakers. My name is Max Formal von Neumann. Joining me, Ewan Midnight Reed, as we're excited to bring you our fight for third and then our fight for first place of the regular season of the LJL.
Yeah, we are formal, and we've got some really exciting teams. I think, because we know what the fight is for. You're fighting to see your playoff runs. Obviously, the better you go here, the easier your life is for playoffs. And I think, speaking of that, it's time to look at the two teams. Our first game of the night is going to be our third and fourth place team. Axis and V3 will be battling out the important third, fourth slot. Because remember, whoever wins between Axis and V3 basically gets to choose between the Hawks and CGA. So you get to choose who you fight in the first round of the finals, which is one serious advantage when it comes to trying to get as far as you can go.
Yeah, it definitely can be because you do want to look at that team that you feel you might match up better against. I think more likely than not, each of these teams are probably going to be taking on Crest based by regular season
Mm.
record. But neither of those matchups is necessarily going to be a guaranteed win. I'm sure we can sort of look at those in a bit more detail when we actually learn what those matches are. But following that fight for third place, of course, is going to be the all important, perhaps the most important fight for the number one seed between Detonation Focus Me as well as Rascal Jester. I mean, when you look at this matchup, they're coming in obviously same record. They went 1-1 against each other during the season. I feel like momentum might be in Detonation's favor. However, in a best of one, anything can happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about momentum. 11 wins in a row for DFM after what was a pretty rocky start coming out from them. Let's be honest. I mean, they went 0-2 in the first week of the LGL. And I don't know, everyone, myself included, looking at them after that performance, like, what? What's going on here, guys? And then they bounced back very quickly, went 1-for-1 in week two, and then have gone undefeated throughout the course of that. So DFM did a really good job bouncing back. But for Rascal Jester, again, from what we knew they were going to be a strong competitor coming into the season, but they've had a few, I think it's fair to say, stumbling blocks where you just wouldn't expect it necessarily if you look over some of their past games. So they are supposed to be the quote unquote weaker of the two teams, but still they've played brilliantly over the course of the second split.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, they definitely are coming in kind of as a little bit of an underdog in this one, just because of the match that we saw them play back during Super Week, I believe, against DFM. So they came up
Hmm.
a little bit short back then. However, the big thing with this team has been the improvement on that consistency. And again, you show up on the day, you play your strong, consistent game, you have the chance to pull off that upset against a team that has been red hot. However, as previously mentioned, that's still game number two. That first game, Axis versus V3, is going to be on first. And I'm super excited to get into the nitty gritties of this one because for me, one of those low key MVP candidates has been that AD carry on Axis. And I feel like this could be a good day for Honey as that bot lane matchup does seem to favor him.
Yeah, looking at that axis with Honey and Nimoy there. Honey has been AD carry that we know can get the job done if given the resources. Specifically, I had the memories of an Aphelios game where, if I'm remembering it correctly, he had his Immortal Shield bow by 8 minutes, had his Collector by 14 minutes, and basically just single-handedly controlled the entire game based on, I believe it was like an early tower dive and a root tower dropping. And that basically allowed V3 sorry, not V3, Axis, sorry, to own the game. And a lot of Axis's game plan seems to be based around their bottom lane, based around Honey and Nimoy. And getting some bit of help with Inno and Hoglet thrown in there too. So it is looking really strong, especially because compared that to the bot lane of V3, you've got Hollow and Reyna. Now, I think Reyna's a pretty good competitor. I really like what they're able to do if you give them something that can do a mixture of playmaking. I think a Thresh on Reyna, I'm a huge fan of. But when you look at who he's paired up with in the bottom lane, I know you specifically, Formal, had a few worries that Hollow might not be able to go toe for toe against Honey.
Yeah, and I think it's a legitimate concern. If you sort of look at the regular season performance, Hollow has been consistently behind in lane through the early and mid game and constantly finds themselves sort of playing catch up. But That's not been V3's lane. That's not what they've been playing through. It's been a
Mm.
lot of Ace and a lot of Mugen, and to a lesser extent, Cog as well in the top lane has just been solidly putting on strong performance after strong performance. And it's why coming into this matchup, the way how I see it, again, it's almost sort of the strong side, weak side, where V3 has that strong top side, perhaps, against a more lackadaisical Axis top side, but that weaker bot side, and then you sort of flip it around for Axis. It could be that clash of styles that really comes to explode once you finally get to see those two ends match.
Yeah, and I think the best part along with that form, or maybe the worst part if you're in the team that doesn't step up for this, is it's BO1s in both of our
Mhm.
tiebreaker games here. So one good play or one catastrophic mistake could tip the scales in one team's favor. And I feel like, especially with a team like Axis that is so heavily dependent on their bottom half of the map, that is willing to have Inoi burn TP and tower die bot lane. I think at like again the 8 minute 7 minute mark to ensure that Honey has a good game. V3 are going to have to really ask themselves some questions like, do you put Hollow and Reina on something super defensive like an Ezreal Yumi or something like that? Do you overemphasize, Cog, Mugen, and Ace on your top half? Or do you try the opposite? Do you know, because you know Axis is going to play around Honey, do you try and match that? Do you play, I don't know, like a Shen on Cog for some reason and really try and play around Hollow, even though it may not be the strongest idea on paper? These teams have had some time to prepare hidden strategies, if you will. So I'm very curious to see what kooky strats they might pull out in this particular match.
Yeah, I mean, that could be fun. I'd be a little bit disappointed if we see Cog on something like the Shen. I don't feel like that's the correct direction to go, especially when we look at the top lane as a whole and see how aggressive it's realistically become. And when you look at, some of Cog's favorite champions, while they might not all be in the meta, a couple of them aren't, there is one that has been making a return in that Poppy. And that is something that we could see from Cog up top. But more realistically, I'm still kind of looking at some of those old favorites. If for whatever reason we get to see a Gwen slip through, or if we get to see that Wukong wind up in the hands of Cog, it could turn into sort of that map pressure strategy to try and limit what that bot lane of Axis can do. I'm kind of banking, or at least I'm hoping, V3 is willing to bank a lot on Cog, who, again, I kind of stand by, at least in my eyes, has been one of the more underrated top laners so far this season. This could be that chance to really get those eyes on him, and this could be that chance to really step up and perform against Inno, who never really has had one of those big steining moments either.
Hmm. I mean, the top lane should be fun. The one part that I get really worried about, and it comes to the pick ban, is based on what I'm looking at. It is going to be V3 on blue, and of course that means
Mhm.
Axis will be facing them off on the red side, and that means that for Axis, you really have to sort of. We know that Kokok has a ridiculous champion pool, I think, and that's fair to say.
Yes.
So you have to look at,
Yeah.
well, you can't really give over the Viego because, well, that's just asking for trouble. Then you look at Mugen and Ace and you think to yourself, crap, there's so many things we have to get rid of just in that top half. Not to mention, Gwen is probably a mandatory ban if you're on red side because otherwise you just first pick the Gwen for
Yeah.
V3. Varus is a potential pick. Aphelios is always potentially on the table. Pair that up with like the Thresh, Leona, Galio, I know is still relatively popular. Twisted Fate Ace has a huge tendency to go towards as well. And the LeBlanc is hidden in the top. There are so many champions that actors have to look at as the red side in this matchup and say, what can we and what can't we afford to have first picked and taken away from us? Because there are just so many really strong things on the table. And there's always, for top lane, that bloody Nah just waiting in the back lanes. Well,
Well,
I suppose we'll
that's
find out, won't we, Formal?
yeah, I suppose we are going to find out because the Gnar was actually what I was going to bring up next because last time, we did see the Cog versus Inno matchup. Inno was the one who wound up taking that Gnar, and Axis actually wound up winning that game. It was a little bit of a roughie for Cog in the end, who wound up going for the Camille to try and find ways to almost be the aggressor in that situation, but was never able to get themselves enabled in that lane. So super curious to see what we see. For the most part, a lot of pretty regular bans. I like the Ziggs ban. I like the
Gwen.
Viego ban, but Gwen was left up. And just as you were saying, Midnight, if the Gwen gets left up, that should get snatched up first pick, and already Cog's on the hover.
Yeah, I don't see why you don't lock this in here. It's a fantastic pickup here.
Hmm.
Cog can play that champion, and yet you first picked that for V3 and Axis. You have to question, was it a lack of bans? Because all three bans from Axis make sense. Viego is really strong in Cog's hand. You don't want to give Hollow access to the Ziggs. and Varus is particularly strong as well. So you're in a situation where something's getting through no matter what you do here in the ban phase.
Yeah, exactly. Look, maybe they just saw the previous match results and they were thinking, last time Cog got that Gwen, it was against Crest Gaming, and they did lose. We'll ignore the fact that by the end of the game in a losing effort, he was still 87 CS up against a set. Nah. They lost the game at the end, so we'll let that through. Plus, we were able to get our Aphelios for Honey. And I do like how Axiz is prioritizing, obviously, Honey in this situation. We are expecting this to be the centerpiece of whatever team composition they're putting together, and Aphelios can very easily be just that.
Yeah, I love the Aphelios, but I'm concerned because, as I always say, if you're locking in an Aphelios, a Varus, something that does not have inherent mobility, Thresh is a must. And V3, it was their second ban. So V3 immediately answer the hyper carry saying, well, you can't dodge a solar flare unless you've got flash and cleanse available. And now they lock in something aggressive to pair up with it. I wouldn't mind that. And yeah, locking a Jhin here is brilliant. Now Honey has to get a defensive support paired up for Nimoy, because I don't know what you can lock in here that's aggressive that won't just struggle in the laning phase.
Yeah, there's a lot of choices, and I feel like Axiz doesn't quite know where they want to go yet, so they're going to fall back on some familiarity. The Gnar will get locked in, going to assume that we'll be going to Inno up top, which tells us Hoglet probably is going to be on that Volibear in the jungle, but normally I would be a bit more concerned about the lack of an aggressive support in this situation. However, if your idea is to play it a bit more safe and scale, there's a lot of good supports that have kind of risen back into the meta in terms of the Enchantress situation. Lulu is always going to be strong, I feel, in these types of situations. I've been seeing more and more Yumis hovering about, which is another direction that I can see Axiz going. The Yumi Aphelios can be surprisingly deceptively strong, but already having that bot lane on the back foot is definitely not the direction necessarily we thought Axiz would be taking.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. I would have loved to have seen, again, the fact that they lost Thresh and still locked in the Aphelios, I think is a little bit odd. But then again, you didn't want V3 to have the Aphelios, so you had to make the trade. So, bit rough. I feel like here, Nimoy, I know it's not been played, but I'm thinking Morgana, just as a way to keep Reyna's aggressive Leona off of your Aphelios. It's not Thresh, but it's probably the next best thing. Is Poor Muujin, man. Losing so many junglers this game. The Viego, which he should be able to flex into, the Lee Sin, the Xin Zhao, and of course the Volibear being picked up nice and early. There's not a whole lot of high-tier junglers left, if memory serves. So I'm very curious to see what he's going to have to resort to here.
I would love to see the Kindred. Well, I mean, I'm actually a little bit surprised. Yeah, I would like to see something like the Kindred actually be locked in right now, and you almost go the double AD comp and just try to really snowball this game with the way how V3 is going, and with how late of a scaling comp that Axiz might be getting cornered in. You could double down on that aggression. Either way, you still wait to see what gets locked in right here, as kind of waiting to see where Honey will go. Going to lock in the Alistar. And that's one, well, you know what? I think that's that nice mix of both. You can still be that aggressor if you want, but it's still going to be a tough ask, I feel like, for Axiz to really get that bot lane prio.
Yeah, it's not bad. I feel like it's a good it's a good replacement, because the Morgana in Enchanters in general aren't popular right now. You need something with a bit more beef. The Alistar is exactly that. So it could be worse, right? It's the best out of a bad situation, because they are a bit starved on support picks, as Muujin locks in the Trundle for themselves. And normally I would be like, well, that's a bit of an odd pick. And then I look and I see a Volibear. And then I look and I see a Gnar. And you know what? That's okay.
And Alistar as well, actually. It's a really smart pick right now to sort of try to combat that front line that Axiz is building for itself. Then you lock in the Sylas to give you an extra bit of counter engage / an ability to get yourselves into that back line and perhaps find ways to harass Inno. I think V3 is very painfully aware how important, Honey, is to that composition of Axiz, and they've put together a very solid team in looking to combat that eggs in the basket style composition.
Yeah, the Orianna here from Axiz, though, on the back end of it. I've been saying for years, I'll continue to say, a good Orianna player can win everything. And Mega Min will be trying to use that in the middle lane. As I must say, I want to quickly bring back, look back at the Sylas here. The Sylas is a brilliant lock-in, not only because it can find Honey's Aphelios and lock them down. Look at the ultimates that
Mhm.
Ace has available to steal. Hoglet's ultimate would be brilliant. Ino's ultimate, assuming he gets anywhere near Honey, is a fantastic ultimate to steal. Mega Min's, again, I don't think there's a single ultimate on the Axiz lineup, bar the Aphelios ultimate, that isn't good for the Ace in this game. So this is a fantastic lock in here. And Axiz, I don't know how they're going to stop the full dive onto the backline. Because if you stop the Silas, then the Leona gets in. If you stop the Leona, then the Gwen you probably get in. There are so many dive styles
Yeah.
coming out of the side of V3 that Axis, it's going to be all hands on deck to keep them alive.
I mean, but that's also why I really like the Orianna pick though coming out of Mega Man right now, because this is sort of like I know it's not a Enchantress support, but I kind of see this being run in a similar style as what could have been a
Hmm.
Lulu in the mid lane, but with a bit more damage and a bit more of that carry potential because you have the amount of sort of ball delivery services, the biggest one being a Nimoy on that Alistair, but then you also have that defense appealing capability. So I really feel like Mega Man isn't ever going to be in the side lane. It's actually going to be looking to play kind of like that second support to Honey, kind of supporting that eggs in the basket. And it's going to be heavily relied upon should we see those successful dives to that back line. Now, that I think probably is going to be the more successful way for V3 to play this. But if they do play this, we could have ourselves a much slower pace game. I could see this one being one of those games that turns into that bit of a chess match where each team is going to get really selective in picking their moments, especially when you consider the stakes of this one being a best of one tiebreak situation. Win this, and you technically finish in third place during that season, and you get that all important selection going into the playoffs where, I mean, here's the thing, it's not just necessarily who you play, but it's also when you play. If you pick yourself into the second match in the quarterfinals, you have an entire extra week to prepare, and I think that's something that these teams should also consider as well.
Yeah, probably a lot of strategy coming through when they're tackling these matches. But there is one bit that I don't entirely agree with. Unfortunately, Formal, we are going to have to
All
do a
right.
little bit of a spat here, which is in the bottom lane specifically. I think that V3 can't afford to let the game play itself again. You've got a Jin who just. I don't think Jin scales that well. Sure, he doesn't do badly, don't get me wrong. But when you compare just the raw damage output of what Hollow is going to bring to the table to what Honey is going to bring to the table, it is night and day. Honey
Mm.
can handle a team fight, no issues. Hollow has to be so selective because there's no point at any is he going to ever kill Nimoy. It's never happening. You don't have
Oh
the
no,
ammo to waste into the cow. You don't have the
no.
ammo to waste into Hoglet. You can only you're in a team fight if you're auto attacking anyone other than Megumin and Honey, it's a waste of a shot. And realistically, we all know that AD carries typically just hit the closest thing ever. So Hollow, an AD carry that you yourself have been a bit worried about, either has to play the fights perfectly in that he's auto attacking at the right moments, or I'm just not convinced that it's going to scale as well into the late game as the Aphelios will.
So I can see why you think that you may have got me with that gotcha right there, but you forgot something very important I said during the pre-show. I'm not looking at Hollow to be that carry midnight. I'm looking to the top side. I'm seeing the Gwen. I'm seeing the Trundle, Cog, and Musion, the two players who I do think have the capabilities to carry V3 through. And if it does turn into that long or drawn out game, I do feel that sideline pressure that Cog should be able to establish with the Gwen might just be enough to avoid those team fights where we could see Honey absolutely popping off and then they wind up winning the macro game. That's sort of what I'm expecting when I'm talking about the decision-making process. Either way, it's very clear there's a lot of directions that this game could go, and realistically, we won't know who's right till wrong until we watch it played out, you know, unless you were out there expecting to be a level 1 fight. Sorry to tell you, that's not going to happen. Instead, we're going to get the level 3 mid lane gank as Mushin steps forward, trying to get to Mega Man as Ace sticks on him. The nice Pillar of Filth will slow this Orianna down. Flash for flash, actually. Mega Man in a bit of trouble because there's not going to be any bot lane or jungle support. They are pinned underneath the tower in V3. Very much looking to be the aggressors. They're going all the way into the jungle, Midnight. They want this kill, and gosh darn it, they're going to get it. First blood goes to Ace.
And the fact that Ace is getting the first blood is brilliant because look at the starting items here. Starting with the Dark Seal is a fantastic gank coming through because now Ace is going to be so far ahead. Mega Man just didn't get away. I think maybe you could have risked flashing over the wall instead of being chased down to the bottom half of the map there. But now Mega Man, not willing to burn TP, is going to start falling really far behind. And if Ace can hit that level 4-5 mark, before Megamin, and Megamin is still just struggling to put anything together, then they're not allowed to fight here. Is Mugen, look at this, it's really good pathing. By the time Megamin realizes it's here, there's nothing they can do. If they walk back towards their turret, they get pillared away. So Megamin's now forced to go forwards. Now, this flash, I'm not a fan of. I think if you go back up towards your turret and then flash over the wall, you might be able to get away. But instead, Megamin panics a bit, flashes in a straight line, and eventually just gets run down as we saw.
I think low key though, the biggest and most impressive part of that gank was how Ace was able to manipulate Megaman away from Hoglet before the play even happens. If you sort of watch the lane positioning, Hoglet was actually at the Raptors right there, but would have had to run through so much traffic and would not have been able to get there in time because of how Ace was able to manipulate that Orianna to the bot side of the mid lane, and that really ensured that no support was coming. Even though the jungle support was coming from the top, they were aware that with the bot lane shoved in, there's really nowhere for Megaman to go, and that's how come they were able to chase so far. So realistically, that entire gank was set up by Ace in just the manipulation of the mid lane sort of structure and presence.
Yeah, and I would expect that to continue there in this middle lane. Megaman forced to recall already after shoving another wave in. Sure, has some nice CS because of Ace had to miss quite a bit in order to hunt down his lane opponent. And there we go, Megaman going for the full sustained team fight build, going for the tier of the goddess. I'm curious to see if this plays, because a lot of players I know don't like going for tier into Riftmaker, which is ironically the first time it was put together was meant to be for Riftmaker. So I'm curious to see which way Megamin does decide to go with this Orianna, as they are. Have they not recalled yet? Am I going blind? I feel like I'm going crazy.
In the top lane, they have recalled up top. Or are you talking about? Everyone has recalled at some
Yeah,
stage.
Megamin. Sorry, I was looking at Megamin. I'm like, but didn't I just see them recall? They already walked back to lane while I was talking. I don't know. As we're seeing, talk about walking. Rain is making their way downtown, but might be making their way back to base because Nimoy and Hoglet came for a little bit of a poke
There
around
was a ward.
control wards.
There was a ward. It was seen. It was fine. You don't need to go
Could've been.
all the way home. And now you can just walk back and actually take care of that ward. Patient play gets rewarded on this instant for Reyna as pace of the game slowing down. Now to be what's expected at this stage. Each jungler going ahead, going to focus on that top side clear. So that matchup between Cog and Nino going to be quite important to see where this lane will wind up. It does look like Cog is trying to become the aggressor in this matchup already. A fairly significant CS advantage and lane positioning. That's going to allow Mugen the ability to invade a bit. Have a look around, see what they can find. The answer is Raptors already taken down. Result will be Cog recalling as they're able to sniff out that, yeah, there's probably a Hoglet nearby.
Yeah, and it's just good discipline here from Cog. You never want to give up this lane. And we can see Inno has been struggling in this lane a little bit. The Gwen has a particularly strong kit, I think it's fair to say. And the Gnar is just really not in the position where it wants to fight. Talk about not fighting. This bottom lane, I was expecting bloodshed. I was expecting a lot of murder, and it's just been a lot of wave clear instead.
Yeah, and point for me right now. This is kind of more what I could have seen coming. Granted, when we talk about early mid games, I still want to see what happens when we hit level 6. Or, well, maybe you're right because the Zenith Blade does connect, and Honey gets taken quite low by Hollow right there. The all-important crit shot, though, is used to clear out a minion, but more importantly, both these bot laners need to be aware those junglers are back on the bot side, and Hoglet gonna have a little sniff around, see what they can find. Oh, wait, the pungent odor of a giant frog. Actually, it's gonna be taking that sense of smell away, and gotta get rid of the Gromp before you look to engage in serious fights.
Exactly. You must, before you challenge the enemy team, you must first defeat God, which is obviously Gromp in this case. As Hoglet's poking around bot side still. The war over the vision is actually super interesting. What is this, an ambush? What's going on?
I am not sure. Well, okay. No blasting cone available, and that's cheeky because it means, hey, no surprise entrance into the dragon. I mean, The question mark pings did go down in the Dragon Pit by the side of V3, mind you, as Reyna just keeps on moving up towards that mid lane, going to clear out that vision before making their way back. But yeah, absolutely. Vision is going to be important on this game because you have to remember how important getting flanks are realistically for both these teams if they want to be the aggressor. They're going to have to try to find ways through that back line. Both Hollow and Honey should be playing so far back that if you can get that direct access, that's going to be huge. So too is this fight over the Rift Herald, as we've already got 4 members of V3 here. Axiz probably a little bit slower to the punch right now, but the most important member, Hollow, is still back in the mid lane. So instead, we get a fair bit of posturing. The Eye of the Herald will be taken by Mujin, and no fight, no one dies. Or is there a fight? Because
Oh,
Ace looking for the re-engage, doesn't quite find it, and now might be
oh no.
stuck out. That's going to cause Hoglet to pull the trigger. Follow from Nemo leads to the shockwave kill secured by Mega Man. Reyna will flash over the wall to safety as Kogkog is left on their own up above, but should be just fine as Axiz doesn't wish to extend the fight.
Ace just getting a little bit too big there. Honey and Nimoy were on the way. They had to know that something was coming. And instead, Ace decides to look for an unnecessary pick on a Hoglet. You have the Rift Herald. Back out. There is no need to force a fight in that situation. But Ace had the Nara ultimate stolen away. I think he was just really looking for something. Looked too hard. Got caught out here. So yeah, again, V3, great position. Got here first with 4 members. Axiz have no choice but to give this up. This is fine. Now, V3, I need to see where Ace thinks he's going for. Okay, so they have no idea the roam's coming through. So Ace basically pulls in them, chooses not to go back over to old Cog, just gets caught out and destroyed by Axiz. And then the rest of V3 are forced to run for the hills because they've lost Silas. They can't do anything at that point.
I wonder how much of that could have been a case of sunken cost fallacy in terms of the decision making with Hollow, who had spent that entire time roaming from that bot lane to look to get involved, that perhaps they felt they had to force the issue to justify that roam, unaware that Axiz had also committed to something quite similar. So really, there wasn't any loss, but it was sort of this projected loss, not knowing where Honey was exactly on the map, that kind of caused them to try and force a fight. Either way, forcing the issue is not going to do either team any favors. Nice use of the pulverize by Nimoy, who does get knocked back a bit by the Pillar of Filth, but with the engage sort of canceled, there's not much V3 can do.
Yeah, they're looking for something posturing to see, well, what can we get away with down here? Are we able to make it work? But, you know, you got to try, right? Like, that's what I really enjoy is the teams that look at plays like that and say, look, it's worth a try. If we get the kill, well, it's not getting anything inherently because Dragon was already picked up by Axiz, but it's worth a look. Get a bit more kills and gold, obviously, on to your Jhin. And Honey staying safe for now. As a game continue to be slow. 2 kills after 11 minutes. So nice and slow match formal. Much I'm sure you're enjoying silently goading over the fact that you did indeed predict how this match was going to play itself out.
As much as I enjoy being right, Midnight, I'm a play-by-play caster as hard, as are you. We do want the action, okay? As I'm sure the people watching along us know. I don't enjoy the result. I just enjoy the process of it, I suppose is a way to look at it. Or maybe it's the other way around. Either way, yeah, there's a small sense of victory here that we don't have a bloodbath in our first 12 minutes, but plenty of time for that to turn around as Mujin starting to eye up Inno right now. Cogcog's going to play the aggressor. Inno may have taken the bait, is about to go super. And this is sort of what V3, I think, was playing around. Gnar does not get the stun, and Cogcog still looks for that re-engage. Pillar of Filth will knock Inno around, but again, Mujin just unable to really get themselves involved. Meanwhile, down below, Moonlight Sigil does connect onto Hollow. They get the root. Do they have the damage? Zenith Blade actually stopping Hoglet before he could get to Hollow. It's a valiant sacrifice from Reyna, and it might not be in vain, as Hollow will at least survive. That's what you want out of your support, but it's still not the result V3 wants overall.
Yeah, Hollow just pushed up way too far unnecessarily. You don't need to be that far pushed without your support, especially when the other team is able to just sort of go with the Aphelios Graviton, which you had to see, but V3 lose their support, who of course gave their life for Hollow, and will get some nice gold here onto Cogcog, and actually might be able to get the turret if Mujin is willing to press the issue.
Yeah, Inno is going to have to be a little bit careful right here. Not going to be able to go Mega before that tower goes down. It's going to try to walk away. Mujin, though, back off as well, which is a little surprising because Ace was roaming up. Meanwhile, back again in the bot lane, teleport's going to be used because Reyna may have been caught out again. Hollow trying to provide what support they can, but no one's going to be able to save this Leona for a second time. She will go down. Ace again showing up too little too late. And that's been a reoccurring theme for V3, I feel like, at this stage of the game. They keep trying to make these plays, but are always behind. Shockwave was
Oh,
used by Ace right there. That was Ace's Shockwave, and it didn't connect anyone.
that's not the best shockwave you've ever seen, Formal. I think that's fair to say. As V3, it looks like equal parts brilliance and equal parts madness coming out of this team so far. We're seeing great, like the top half of the map with Cog and Mugen looks great. You know, we're seeing Cog, yeah, got the first turret, got all the gold, got the herald. But then when you look at the bottom half of the map here, Ace has made one questionable decision. Is I need to find out how Reyna finds himself in the heart of three members. You have to know that Mugen Hoglet's down here, and Reyna just decides to go in anyway. That's really poor understanding of what's going on here from Reyna. Your jungle is topside. You're not.
I'm sure I was thinking what everyone else was thinking is like, oh, okay, they walked forward into the death bush, not expecting the ambush. Hold this thought, Shockwave gets two, but Mega Man flashes to the wrong side of the Pillar of Filth. Still is able to get behind it in the end, though, as Hoglet is looking to re-engage with Inno. That blade not going to connect, and it does look like V3 is going to back away. But yes, real quick, just to touch back on that replay we saw. Yeah, I thought the same thing that everyone else probably did. You know, Reyna was just going to overextend a bit and then get jumped upon, but no, saw the ambush and thought, I'm going in regardless. And perhaps Reyna might think the same thing again here because we got a bit of a dragon dance being set up.
Hopefully he's a bit more careful. I know the concept of Leona is find fight, start fight, but you need to be so careful when you do that, as Ace does have the Alistar Unbreakable. Remember, that's like 60% damage reduction at level 11. So massive if Ace can get access to Battleline. Dragon is started. This could be something, but mega enough for Inno's here as well.
Dragon's low, less than 1k, and yeah, V3 wants no part of this. I think they're starting to wisen up that being the aggressor isn't always the good thing in this match. They are forced to give up that second dragon. They might lose a bot tower as well. That said, Honey is all alone and is able to sidestep the Zenith Blade. That could have been massive for V3, and instead, it might go the other way.
Oh my God!
2v1, he cares not. The Moonlight Sigil is more than enough to scare that bot lane away, and the tower is going to be soon to fall. Meanwhile, back in the mid lane, Ace is about to meet three hungry members of this Axiz side, and how badly do you want to stay around for this housewarming party, Ace? Because they've kicked the door open and, well, they're just taking what they want and bailing.
V3 are what started off strong has completely fallen apart. Their points of pressure no longer exist. The mid lane and their top lane has gone even at best. You know, the one kill going over to Ace is nice, but it's nothing of an advantage. Meanwhile, if you look at what's happened on the bottom lane, while it started off well for Hollow and Reyna, the gold difference tells the tale very nicely between these two bottom lanes here. And that is just courtesy of the fact that we're seeing again and again, it's not Hollow. Well, Hollow got caught out, sure, but it's not Hollow that's surprised me in this game. It's Reyna. Someone who I said was going to have to be fundamentally strong for this bot lane to work is just sort of lost their mind a little bit.
I wouldn't go that far in just throwing it all on one player, though, because I kind of feel like it's a symptom of the entire V3 team right now, and that they're always slow. They always seem to be like half a screen off being where they need to be in terms of setting up and executing these plays. Let's look back at the Dragon fight. They kind of pulled the trigger because Hollow wasn't quite there yet, but they still thought they could force it and couldn't. And then we look at both the gameplay in the bot and then up top where you had Mugen looking to get involved, but the trigger is pulled that little bit too early, and Mugen kind of shows up and is unable to do anything and wastes the time in those setups, and V3 winds up losing out overall as that end result. It's been these little mistimings, these little mistakes that have built up on top of Reyna getting caught out now twice in unfortunate situations that have put V3 kind of deep down in this hole.
That's 2,000 gold, 2 dragons. It is only 1 turret for now. And, of course, those last 2 extra kills. What is this?
Oh, what was that solar flare is the question we should be asking. very unfortunate ultimate coming out of Reyna, who looks to still just be trying to
Honey's
walk
stuck.
right in. All right, well, you're walking right into your death. Honey picks that one up. Mujin's going to fall as well. I wasn't sure before Midnight, but now I agree. Reyna has lost their goddamn mind.
Like, I like the aggressiveness, but there's a point where you need to realize if you haven't got a numbers advantage, if you haven't actually got a way to kill them, you have no right to play aggressive. And now, V3 are probably just going to lose their tier 2 in the mid because of a botched play there. After the failed engage from V3, back. Oh, okay, so the idea is Honey's pushed up. Let's try something on this. But the pushback from there is brilliant there from Nimoy. The pillar baits. Watch this. Beautiful pillar. Honey panics, doesn't flash, doesn't do anything. Reyna gets in close, immediately flashes afterwards. But Hoglitz arrived. What? TP coming through, and Nugent and the rest of V3, you can't dive a turret like that when you do not know where the rest of the enemy team is. You're just not allowed.
You know what the saddest part of all of that, watching it back, was? The initial Zenith Blade stun. The Zenith Blade hit as... Oh, no. Reyna's getting caught out again. Okay, we know where this is going. Look, the initial Zenith Blade stuck. Yeah, okay. Shock off. Shockwave killed. Nice. The initial Zenith Blade did strike Honey, but the auto attack stun hit Nimoy.
Yeah.
It was done right there. It was... What has happened to Reyna? Maybe Reyna wants to play that week earlier.
Maybe you just send it in. If you send it in the game, you can send it in the weeks. Is I think maybe no. But it's just really weird. Like I understand because of course we've all played the Leona. Leona's entire identity as a champion on the professional level is the ability to start a fight whenever you damn well want, with the Zenith Blade, with the Solar Flare, with everything you have to bring to the table. So it's not a question of is Reyna able to play the champion because it's a Leona. It's, put it bluntly, it's not difficult. What we're seeing is a lack of understanding of when to pick the fight. And that's what's hurting V3 right now because they see an opening and they take the opening without thinking, hey, are we actually allowed to? And we might see that again as Reyna
not
loses
again.
a third of their health.
Leave Reyna alone, okay? They've gone through enough right now. And at this stage, it's just, again, the most prolific example of what has been V3's sort of awkward decision-making, I feel, this entire game. It's why I don't want to put everything on this Leona. Like, everyone on this team has been kind of caught out at these weird moments. And this could be yet another, as the entirety of Axiz is going to arrive in time to challenge this Dragon. You know they're going to go for that steal. Reyna is on the flank. But the Dragon is secured by V3, and now they look for the fight. Shockwave does jam up that front line as Hollow nearly gets jumped upon by Nemo, but unable to pin him down. Meanwhile, Kong in that front line is ignored. A three-man Gnar that Axiz team might have just won this fight in favor of the Axiz side. Kong tries to escape over the wall, but there is nowhere to go except into a big, angry bear. Nice sidestep. Blasting Cone doesn't go his way, so Kong will escape. However, how about that Gnar?
That was such a beautiful job there from Axiz as a team. I am accused of being coin flippy here. The setup is good from both sides here. V3 are trying to lure Axiz and say, come on, you definitely want to come in here. Reyna on the flank, trying to find something. Dragon is secured. Now, Axiz have two decisions. Do we back up or do we, well, they're forced to fight here. A beautiful shockwave though, and V3 are immediately forced to scatter. Inno on the front line realizes, hey, wait a second. It's a mountain dragon. It's a mountain field. This is my territory. Destroys V3. And what's left of their health, look at Honey. Honey doesn't drop below below 3/4 HP from the start to the finish of the fight there. And I'm pretty sure they were rocking Infernum the whole time. But yeah, the shockwave from Mega Man, beautiful setup to lower them down. And then Inno doing God's work with that jump and, of course, the Gnar.
I mean, it's not every day you see a Gnar get a three-man ultimate with all and split up a team at the same time. Like the fact that he was able to hit them on three various different sort of walls was massive. And now Inno's going massive again. Another Gnar. The boulder isn't enough to secure the kill. Kong though probably wants no more part of this one as Just steps right through that ultimate like, yeah, I ain't afraid of nothing after what we saw before. This is my lane. This is my game now. And Axis, I think, is starting to play with a bit of that swagger. As Nemo actually uses the Hex Flash defensively.
Oh my
Moonlight Sigil
lord.
does not connect. And maybe this is an opening that V3 needs. Solar Flare kind of slows Honey up, but doesn't get the stun. Teleport still coming through as all of V3 wins in on this. Curtain Call being used to try to get to that back line. Body blocking it is Nemo. And now comes that re-engage. Watch for the Shockwave. It is available, but it doesn't hit anyone as Kog'Kog gets jumped upon by the Axiz side. Reyna tries to turn things around with the Zenith Blade, but dies before they can launch themselves in, as too does Kog'Kog. Axiz pick up another couple kills, and now they're looking at Baron.
Yeah, really, really well done there by Axiz. I must say, I am really impressed with how this team is fighting out the fights. V3, we talked about how they always seem a step behind, a dollar short of what is going on in this game here. And this fight is just, it's happening again. Let's take a look at this. So V3 don't realize that Honey has the Shakrams. By the time they realize, it's like, crap, we got to get out of here. We don't want to be here. The Flash Force is out there. Now, Mugen says, well, let's try something onto Honey. A beautiful solar flare, but the cleanse. This throws V3 completely off center. Instead of trying to back away, they commit to the fight, and that's when they realize, well, crap, we're not in the position to fight this. They get counter-engaged on. Shockwave doesn't connect, which is a bit of a disaster. Nemo gets a lovely setup. And Reyna, that solar flare was never going to work. Kog'Kog just stands in front of the turret? What? That's Kog'Kog's probably a bit frustrated. I feel like that's fair to say. Yeah, there it is. The Honey Show. What a surprise. It's Axiz time, baby.
It is absolutely Axis time at this stage. And again, I feel like that setup goes for a lack of communication, team not being on the same page or something along those lines of decision making, because Mushin still committing to that fight back at the very start when both Reyna and Hollow were running away. And granted, okay, yeah, you run back for the curtain call. However, those are the types of situations that we run through as we take another look at that gold per player. Honey just absolutely blitzing away a 3K gold advantage right now over Hollow, and that is so much damage as
Whoa.
Ace is going to try to be the desperate player right here. Solar Flare doesn't connect on anyone, and still Kog'Kog gets to that back line, gets the flash out of Honey, but now has nowhere to go except to go further deep. Here comes that peel back. Kog'Kog has to go golden. You got the curtain call as well, but nothing is going to save V3 in this situation. And here comes Axis straight through the front door of that jungle. They find a second and third kill amongst the melee, and now they're knocking on the V3 base.
V3, that was the do or die play. If they didn't get Honey there, they've lost, I think. I don't know if they'll actually be able to hold it. Axis could look for more than just the inhibitor. They could actually look for the Nexus itself. 20 seconds on Mugen, 20 seconds on Kog'Kog. This could actually be the end of the game for them.
I feel like it very well will be. Axis leave their mark on this tiebreaker if they can secure it here. V3 is going to try for this heroic last stand, but they can't even get to the back line. Not when you got Inno going Mega Gnar, not when the Nexus explodes. Axis takes third place in the LJL.
Yeah, Axis coming out looking brilliant in this game here. From start to finish, it felt like they were always the ones making that first play, but the first blood there. A beautiful showing from the boys in yellow was that color, I'm pretty sure I saw. So a really, really good showing. As you said, they'll take third place, which of course means that V3 will be ending tiebreakers in fourth. So yeah, it's not a bad position to be in, right? But now V3 I'm pretty sure V3 don't get to choose between Hawks and CGA. So they have to get whatever Axis don't want to deal with. And again, it's not the end of the world, but that's far from an ideal situation.
No, it's definitely not where you want to be, but what I'd be more concerned about is less my opponents and more our own decision making that we showed on display in this best of one. Always a bit behind the macro. I feel like decision making might not be the right word, because I do feel like they were trying to make the right plays, but they were always too slow in enacting them, and they never seemed in pace, particularly Mugen. I know we can look at that Leona and go like, okay, that was a roughie, but in my eyes, Mugen always trying to commit to these plays, but having minimal to no impact whenever the trigger was pulled, and often through no fault, I would say, on Mugen's own as well. Oftentimes it was the laners kind of pulling the trigger early, or, well, there was the fight at the Rift Herald, or following the Rift Herald, I should say, when Hollow wasn't involved. But that's what I mean. There's so many examples of this that was happening throughout the game that I think we're going to be taking a little break before we come back to break it down in greater detail. So stay with us. We will be right back with a few more tie-break scenarios, situations, and a whole nother match that's also going to be coming around the corner. You don't want to miss anything here.
We were born from light before there even was a dawn. So pure, so bright, falling from the skies above into our darkened fate. The time has come, walking through this world we bear the secret of our lives. The light we share, caught in destiny we shine, for we are meant to be the star guardians. Gone in a flash before our time, up in the skies together. The vow we have made has kept us strong. Don't fade away, it's time to shine. Burning bright as we reach out for the same horizon. Burning brighter, we're running out of time, we're chasing the light. Gone in a flash before our time, up in the skies together. The vow we have made has kept us strong. Don't fade away, it's time to shine. Burning bright as we reach out for the same horizon. Burning brighter, piercing through the dark, we burn on and on and on.
Welcome back, everybody. Our first match is in the books, and a team that we've called a coin flip here, well, they flipped it and landed on possibly Crest Gaming. Either way, they landed on heads, and maybe they get to flip another coin to choose who they want to play against. But if Axiz, I don't think it matters who they play against. If they put a performance like that, they might be going to the semifinals with relative ease.
Yeah, Axiz coming out with one of the strongest performances we've seen coming through. And that was after a drafting phase that you and I got a little worried about, right? The Gwen got through for Cog, and while it did look good on the top half of the map there, it just was not enough. And specifically, I think there's no avoiding the elephant in the room here, Formal, the bottom lane. Hollow and Reyna facing off against Honey and Nimoy was pretty painful in parts to watch. There were some brilliant signs of life. There were some questionable signs of life. There was things that made you just scratch your head. I feel like this is the first place we kind of have to look at is the bottom lane.
Yeah, let's go into it. And we are going to go straight into what I thought was the biggest determining factor in that bot lane. And believe it or not, it wasn't actually Reyna in my eyes. I'm still going to be a little nice to this Leona, but I'm going more towards Honey because I want to ride that Honey train a little bit
Mm.
longer on that Aphelios. And I guess you can maybe put some of this on Reyna, but it felt like one of the key elements in how that bot lane was able to get ahead was just a lack, I suppose, of V3's ability to sort of track the switching of the Aphelios items. And they got caught out a lot of times with some of those snares, with some of those stuns when they would push in too deep, get caught out, and then snap up, it's getting turned back around. I think we saw that most prolifically when Honey nearly 2v1'd back when that tier
Mm.
1 tower was up and still standing.
Yeah. And just the affiliates in general is just a really, really strong champion. So if you're letting that through, fine. Like, I'm not a fan of letting affiliates through, but that's like, that's your decision. But then if you lock in a relatively short range composition, Gwen, melee champion, Trundle, melee champion, Silas, melee champion, Leona, melee champion, Jin, it's got a bit of range, sure, but you've locked in a mostly melee composition against an Aphelios.
Yeah,
You're
which
kind
is
of
why
asking to get shot in the face at that point.
Which is why, and now we are going to put some of the pressure onto Reyna now. You've got to nail your engages. And one of the strengths of
Yep.
Leona is you might be melee champion, but you've got that range engage and you have that ability to get into Honey's face. However, The only time we saw a solar flare connect, it was the easiest cleanse in the world to avoid, and that completely flipped that fight. Not to mention the solar flares we saw miss on multiple occasions. Not to mention the Zenith blades we saw hit, but without the follow-up stun going the wrong way onto Nimoy or just not being able to connect at all. Reyna had a roughie. Most of the Zenith blades actually went onto Nimoy and not onto Honey to begin with. I'm thinking of after the first death, walking back into lane, spotting the ambush and throwing themselves in, hoping for that teleport to come through. But it was never going to happen. Not in the time that was needed. Again, V3 always a minute late to everything in this matchup. It just was a tough one. And when you are a champion like Leona that's based on timing and your entire team is kind of off tempo, it's going to hurt. It's going to look painful. Sometimes it's going to look worse than what it actually is for that player. But I have to acknowledge the fact that Reyna did themselves no favors.
Yeah, it's you know what it feels like in a way, formal. If we are going to equate this to being of tempo and such, I feel like what we just witnessed was like high school prom and that dance that the school insists upon doing, and maybe like three people actually know how to dance, and everyone else is sort of either standing awkwardly. So V3 are just standing awkwardly at the side, not really wanting to get up from their chairs. And Axis, they've gone out there and they're like, it looks good, but there's like there was still a few areas that needed a little bit of work. And then of course V3 just didn't get out of their chairs until it was far too late. And then when they did, they realized that all the popular kids had tied their shoelaces together because that's still funny.
Okay, so if we're talking like dances and stuff, does that make Honey like Abby Lee Miller in this situation, just coming in angry and looking to burn all those terrible dancers down? Because that's what it felt like on multiple occasions. Or maybe it wasn't Honey. Maybe it was Inno in the top lane who had to stay stuck top, pinned down by Cog for 20 minutes of the match, just to wait for one moment to pull off arguably one of the best Gnar ultimates I have ever seen.
Mm. I feel like if you're in Inno's point of view, you looked at the first half of that game because again you got stuck on Gnar duty because the LJL loves its Gnar into literally anything, even if the matchup isn't great. In this case, Gwen just spent most of the learning phase bullying out that to finally get that one ultimate where you're like, oh, it made my suffering worthwhile. Because that team fight, specifically that Nara ultimate, was enough to put Axis in that dominant position. Because the next team fight, we saw V3 dive out for Honey. Because if they didn't kill Honey, they lose the team fight just straight up. I think Honey had 3 items at that point. I think they had, of
Yeah.
course, they had their shield bow, collector, and I believe it was a Lord Doms was their 3rd item. So if you don't kill Honey, you lose the fight. But if you dive into the backline, kill Honey, and lose all your health, you still lose the fight. And Inno basically set that up courtesy of the Gnar and making sure that I think no one escaped alive around that dragon fight. And it makes Actis look less like a coin flip team and more like a team that is finally, it's a bit weird to say a team finally has found its identity in, hey, look, you've got this superstar marksman. Maybe you should play around him.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Hey, well, let's see if they continue to do so. The thing about coin flip teams is they'll look like the best team in the region one day, and then the next day, well, then we're back to it might not have been them, but if I say like Lee Sin Senna, you kind of get where I'm going with that one. So I know a different team. I know a different team. I just wanted to bring that up. That sometimes different looks come out, and things that should be stock standard can get flipped on their head. That's why playoffs have to be played. But before we can even think about playoffs, we need a #1 seed in the LJL. We need to know who is going to be repping as the favorites of the summer split. And for that, we got one more tiebreak. The Rascal Jesters taking on Detonation Focus Me. That will be coming at you after another break.